Hello, welcome to Jeff Shrimpton's One Giant Leap podcast. And today I have Graham Collett, who is the owner of Westlands Farm and Farm Shop over in Wickham, which is near Southampton. Say hi, Graham.
Hello.
Graham, thanks for being on the podcast today. Graham's a client of mine. We've been working together for about a couple, I think we're just coming up to our 2-year anniversary.
Yeah.
And, you might not remember this, Graham, but I spoke to you first about 6 months or 4 months before we started working together. I think we might have been connected on LinkedIn. I might have just given you a call just to introduce myself to you. And I really remember that call. I remember thinking that this is somebody who's really ambitious, had really great, clear plans for the business, and was really thinking strategically about the business. And I remember on that call thinking to myself, that is exactly the kind of person I want to work with. And you had a target on your back ever since from that point. And
thank you very much.
And because I love working with people who are really open-minded in that way, that sometimes when I work with a client, it takes it's a little bit of a challenge to get them to, open up a book and start that learning. And then some people, you didn't even need me to get you started on that journey because you were already way down that journey yourself. So it is a real pleasure to work with entrepreneurs like that. So I'm really pleased to have you on the podcast today because I know that the business is doing phenomenally, and there's going to be some really interesting and inspiring things for people who are listening to this to hear.
Yeah, I hope so.
So when this came about really from a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, and you were looking back at when we first met, and like you were. By the way, anyone that's listening, Graham is like mega humble. So to get him to say anything good about himself is going to be a real challenge for me today because he's very, very modest. But you were already a great entrepreneur at that point anyway. But you reflected back to me the other day that just to learn back, because it happened incrementally over time, you feel that there'd been like a big change and massive growth in that period. Do you want to tell us, what things you feel that you've grown and learned and changed over that last couple of years?
Yeah, where do I start really? I mean, initially my first encounter with yourself, I came along to one of your 90-day planning sessions. And up until that point, I hadn't really considered the power of planning in that way. So that was a big jump, actually making those plans and implementing them within the business with a giant sort of leap forwards.
How's that helped you, Graham, using those plans? If anyone's watching, if you're on the podcast, you won't see this, but if you're watching this on video, Graham's 90-day plan is over his left shoulder in the top right-hand corner of the screen.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's pretty empty at the moment because I'm sort of preparing it for January again, being December at the moment. Yeah, I think just putting your goals for each quarter down and then breaking it into simple weekly tasks to make sure you stay on track and keep it done. It's almost unnoticeable that you're marching towards your goals. That was the first big step. I really sort of went looking for assistance with the business because we're a farming company. I trained as a farmer 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And as the business has slowly grown, I just went looking for knowledge, practical knowledge that I could apply in running it, because really no one teaches you this stuff. I trained practically as a farmer. I was trained in the finer points of veterinary medicine or horticultural crops and bits and pieces like that. Nobody teaches you how to recruit and manage staff, or how to manage a cash flow, or how to do all those things that when you suddenly realize you don't know how to, and it's critically important that you do know how to, it's good to go and ask for help, really. So that was the beginning of it. And yes, I can still remember our first coaching session, Jeff, and we spoke mainly about my family and children and schools. And then identity. I remember doing the identity Iceberg was one of the first ones, and it wasn't until a few sessions later that it sort of hit me that knowledge or learning is really focused around sort of knowledge acquisition is the first part of it, and then behavioural change is the second part of it, and know something new and do something new, because you can know something new, but if you don't do anything different, then it doesn't work, does it? So that was the identity iceberg. And I think coming back, my children at the time, a young son who was 5 years old and in an ordinary sort of state school, and he was really struggling. He's one of those little boys who's always on the go and never really paying attention. Was falling really badly behind, and having somebody all of a sudden in Jeff who could look in from the outside and sort of see that there might be another possibility, i.e. in this instance to move education setting for him and pay a bit of money towards it, and that was okay. So yeah, that was sort of the beginning of it, and we've just sort of gone from there, haven't we?
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about identity and the identity shift of someone who invests in the best education for their children. There's probably a shift in that, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that doesn't come about from a reluctance to do so. I think it just comes about from considering that it is a possibility for you, and that's what I think we mean by identity, don't we? And that you just don't see it, that it's a possibility for you until it's, the idea is tabled. Then
well, that's the point of identity. It's almost an invisible force that guides all of us. It channels us like train tracks, and we just don't see it. And things that we look at, if you've got an identity of someone who doesn't do that, you say, well, that's not for me. I won't even entertain it, consider it, or think about it, because that's what they do. But when the identity shifts, you go, oh, actually, that'd be something I could do too.
Yeah, I think the identity iceberg is a really simple little diagram that is used within action coach, and I keep coming back to it and thinking about it. And the bit above the water is behavior, and I think most people say, well, that's the bit everybody can see. Yeah, that is the bit everyone can see. Maybe you could also look at it another way and say that's your conscious mind. That's the bit you know about yourself. And then everything below the water, your skills, knowledge, beliefs, values, and then identity is then almost your subconscious mind. But then the output of that is your behavior. So everybody says in business you need to trust your gut. Well, the trouble is your output of trust your gut is all the bit below the water that's making it up, and you realize that actually it might not be that helpful.
I've never thought of it that way, conscious and unconscious mind, but I think you're absolutely right. And that's what I love about these concepts, is that you can always go a little bit deeper and learn a little bit more about it. So I'm going to give that some thought after the call.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I think the behavior is what people see, and quite often that's what people try and change. I'll just try and do things differently. But of course, if your identity comes from your conditioning comes from your childhood, and when you're a young child, you're a sponge, and you just soak up everything around you, all the lessons that your parents teach you, whether that's intentional lessons or unintentional lessons. You find that they get soaked up, and it just becomes your identity. It becomes who you are. And if your family always holidayed in the Maldives, you're going to want to go to the Maldives when you're an adult. If your family always took you to Devon, then you'll think that's the sort of holiday that you should go on, and until you kind of think a bit differently and you change the identity.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I grew up from the age of 9 years old working on the family farm, and very much the environment was roll your sleeves up and knuckle down and get the work done, and that's what made the difference. And yeah, that's what made the difference. But of course, we have the what got you here won't get you there, and you have to evolve. And as the business grew, I was then finding myself, I'd be doing what I always thought was the right thing, what I felt to be the right thing, and of course it isn't anymore. So you have to retrain and learn something new and behave in a different way.
Yeah, I think when we first met, you had a bit of a farmer's attitude to weekends, in which that is weekends are what muggles do, not what farmers do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's conditioning, because that's kind of all you knew at that point.
Yeah, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you think have been your key learnings then along your journey in recent times? You talked about behavior change and identity shift. What else?
I think a lot of the things that we've implemented in the business, much of my challenges were centered around staff and staffing.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I interacted with the staff in the business, I mean, we now have around 50 staff. So it's critical to be able to communicate, manage, and lead. Again, something they don't teach you at agricultural college. So I think really for me, the learnings around how to interact with staff, from hiring to onboarding to managing day to day, dealing with culture, installing a culture in the organization, which is an ongoing process. We're always working on it. It's never finished. Those are the ones that have had the biggest impact on the organization thus far. I think it's safe to say that before coaching, we were really kind of just making it up as we went along. We read a few books, a few articles, a few points of view, but yeah, and those are definitely the things that have propelled us forward.
So tell us what you've done in terms of culture and the shifts and change that you've made within the business.
Well, the first thing there is always a culture, if it's written down or not. Just is it the one you chose?
Yeah.
So one of the earlier things that we did was to sit down in coaching sessions, numerous coaching sessions this took, I must admit, it's not easy to do, and define the vision, mission and culture. So effectively where the company is going, what needs to be done to get there, and then the type of person that you need to become to get there. So to actually clarify that and get that down into a document was the first step. I then ran kind of evening training sessions with the various teams on culture to start to embed that, and we're currently now embedding that in processes. So it's a continual reminder. If somebody picks up a process on recruitment, for example, it's tied back to the culture, the candidate that they're interviewing. How do they fit with our culture? Do they care about the customer? Do they care about profitability? Do they care about food safety? Those sorts of things.
So if you're hiring on culture rather than just hiring a CV, you're much more likely to get the better people, aren't you? The people, not better, so the right people, the right fit for you.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first phrase that I was taught was hire for attitude, train for skills, which is a really simple, straightforward North Star almost in hiring, because you can teach somebody to do something, but you can't teach somebody to be something. So if you want hardworking, reliable, conscientious, customer-focused people, then you need somebody who's got that built into their personality, whereas you can train them how to use the equipment and
just reminded me, actually, I've got some feedback for you. I can't remember who it was, a client or a friend of mine who is also a customer of yours, and you came up in conversation. I think we were talking about turkeys for Christmas.
Okay.
And whoever it was, they said, do you know what? You can really tell in that business that everybody there just looks like they love it. They're so, because you've just had a refurb, they're so proud of the refurb that you've done and the new products that you sell, and it absolutely, like, it just radiates out of the staff.
That's really great to hear. I'm glad that that's the experience.
Yeah, that's the output, and that wasn't kind of led by me, that conversation. It was just something that was remarkable for that person who is a customer of yours, that you can just tell. You've got Morney and the other guys there,
Yeah.
City, and they're just so excited. And Harry, I don't want to leave any of them out, and
No,
Harry
no.
as well. They're so excited to be there. They're really proud of the business that they work in, and really love selling the products that you sell, and because I think it's written into your culture, isn't it, to be proud of selling, locally sustained, really high quality food, and that is written into your culture. So it's good to see that's being lived and breathed by your team.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out as well that we didn't always have that. We didn't always have that. We have had times when we've employed unwittingly the wrong people with poor attitude and things like that, and then you're on the back foot and you've got customer complaints and you've got problems to deal with. When we used to have a tea room on the premises, that was continually fraught with staffing challenges, and it led to a lot of coaching sessions, a lot of headaches to try and resolve. And yeah, in the end, we when coronavirus came along, we closed the tea room. So
yeah, I think the local community will think that coronavirus was the end of the tea rooms, but it was a marked man way before that, really, wasn't it? And
yeah,
you tell us, because if the coronavirus hadn't happened, there still wouldn't be a tea rooms there now. And tell us about why that decision was being made.
Yeah, coronavirus was definitely the push rather than the jump, but it was there. We always saw the tea room as like a lead for bringing people onto the premises for shopping, but ultimately it was too small a business to actually justify employing the caliber of people that it needed to employ at that time. Finding dedicated people was very, very difficult. So yeah, we just had continual problems with attendance. We had continual problems with compliance. If you've got chefs in kitchens, they need to do paperwork and they need to actually consider that food safety might be an issue and things like that. So you're always chasing them up, always pulling them up, always seem to be struggling with customer service as well, was continually poor.
Well, actually, I think you're being a bit hard on yourself there, because even though it was a real pain for you to run that business, I think not many of the customers would have known that, because some of them did like it, and they came in, they had some nice meals there and some nice tea and cake, and there were some good people there. So I think I think from your side of things, it was like trying to push water uphill. I think you did a good enough job, actually. I think you don't want to do yourself down too much. But
no, but in order to get to in order to get to something normal, I was having to sort of run weekly evening training sessions to continually remind everybody of what they needed to be doing, and continually dropping back in. So the management level to get it to be passable in our eyes was too high.
But I think the key thing was when we started splitting out your figures. When I start working with a client, as you know, Graham, first of all, we start looking at the finances of the business through our eyes, then through a magnifying glass, and then to a microscope. And I think you were already certainly looking them up with your eyes, but we had to move to magnifying glass, which meant splitting the figures out from the farm shop and the tea rooms, and then realised for the amount of your time and energy spent on it and the amount of profit contribution there, it was not a good decision. It was a fairly easy decision, wasn't it? And like you say, the coronavirus really was the puff of wind that sent it over the edge that it was about to go over anyway.
Yeah.
And it was a brave call, and but what's happened is you've now got the space to expand. Just briefly tell us what you've done recently in terms of expanding your farm shop offer.
So we made quite a large investment. We removed the tea room kitchen and all its seating area, redecorated the building. This kind of more than doubled the floor space for sales area, and we've installed a much larger fruit and veg display. We've installed gravity fill dispensers, so people can buy just what they need in terms of like cereals, pulses, those sorts of things. That's very popular at the moment because it's a it's environmentally friendly. The same, we've got a frozen fruit and veg range from Field Fair. We've teamed up with a local dairy farmer who we've got a vending machine, a milk vending machine on site. That's many other local products, a gift range. We never had a gift range, so we actually sell nice things. Usually you actually buy for presents as well. So that's quite nice. And we just had a complete overhaul, rebrand. Because of the coronavirus element, we got the builders in and made a new entrance to the building at the end. So you can now have a actually dedicated one-way system around. So and then we kind of crafted a relaunch. Didn't we? In various coaching sessions, we had relaunches and ideas batting around, and then the local MP came down. We're now working with Kevin, of course, who's the social media specialist, another client of yours. And he's been a real.
Let's give him a plug. That's Kevin Briscoe, Briscoe PR.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done, Kevin.
Great guy.
He's done a fantastic job, and he's really helped boost the awareness of the business. We've been on 3 different radio interviews now, umpteen different newspaper articles, and then he does a whole bunch of social media work and advertising email and all sorts of things. So that's been another thing we've been working on, of course, in coaching sessions is marketing and taking our marketing seriously, because sometimes it takes that outside element to look in and say that doesn't look very good.
Well, what you've done with your offer, and I don't think I had really any impact in that at all. That's all your own doing. Was not only have you created an outlet that your team are proud to work in, but I think you've created a place where people are proud to shop in.
Yes.
Because it's environmentally sound, because you're reducing the waste of the packaging and people can come and get the refills. It's all locally sourced. It's really high quality. And I think that you're becoming a brand that locally people say, people will recommend you and say, what are you doing with all these refills of your hand soap? Get yourself to Westlands. And people are proud to shop with you. And I think that's a really special thing.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a really positive outcome to 2020 for us. When, of course, the coronavirus pandemic hit, we were all at sea for a little while. We were very, very busy. We had, hundreds and hundreds of people trying to come in, and we had to very quickly learn to cope with that many people. We very quickly popped up a delivery service to service the elderly people who were shielding. So it's been a year of change. It's been a year of very fast change, and I think having you on board as well has been quite important to be able to bounce ideas when you've got to change that quickly. Yeah,
I mean, you were in the when the lockdown happened, and when that happened in March, April, whenever it was, there was a big shock at that point. I think the first thing you did was run outside and drill a soap dispenser to the outside of the building and put a big sign up.
Yeah.
It took the supermarkets 4 months to do that.
Yeah, I don't get that. I mean, we had them around because obviously one half of our business is a farm shop. The other half is the soft fruit. So, of course, on the soft fruit side, you've got all that stuff. So it's not in use at that time. So it was like, well, surely everybody should be sanitizing their hands. Let's just go and get some sanitization stations and put them around the place. But yeah, I don't see why they took so long to cotton onto that. And it was just throw it outside and put a sign up. It was
crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of being small and nimble, is that you can move faster.
Yeah.
And you can adapt quicker. So, Graham, I want to talk about some specific examples of things that you've implemented and results that probably inspire people who are listening to go, that even if it's not in the same thing, because you're in farming, they probably aren't, but just examples of things that have been really beneficial for the business. And we talked about eyes, magnifying glass, and a microscope. We're now moving you to microscope level and looking at the different levers in your business to pull, and thinking about the farm shop. The two of the main levers are how many people come through the doors, and your average basket spend. And by serving the community and getting great products on, you've been able to increase the basket spend. Tell me how. When we first worked together, what was it, about £17, wasn't it?
Yeah, about £17. And we were sort of 450, 500 customers a week.
Yeah.
There. Now we're about £25. We've actually got a little competition running with the staff at the moment, that they've got to get it for an average month over £25 their basket spend. And of course they're all practicing their best sales pitches. So and customer numbers are sort of 900 to 1,000. So
so we're gearing up the business in not more than one way. It's all right, very well chucking more people at it, but if you can chuck more people at it and increase the marginally what they spend, and then we haven't even got onto margins yet as well, and repeat business, but just those two dynamics there, just you get double the growth, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. And really implementing the dashboard has been really useful, because of course we're now, those numbers become visible, and as soon as they become visible, if you don't like them, they come to the forefront of your thinking and the way you're communicating with your staff, what you're communicating with your staff, that you go looking to change them, and inevitably they do. I think, that's one example. Another example, more recently, of course, we've been doing the cost of goods sold reduction, haven't we, across the business? And that started from my cash flow story. Yeah.
So we ran Graham's numbers through software that I use, and it showed he was particularly sensitive and would get most benefit from reducing his cost of goods as a percentage, much more than if he was just reducing his overheads. So I set Graham a bold challenge. I think it was 100,000, wasn't it, to find?
Yes.
And to do that, instead
we're getting closer.
You're getting close. Yeah. Instead of sending them that one challenge and giving you the whole business to do it, which means the brain tends to block up. What we've done is what we call profit slicing. So we've chopped the business up into about 15, 16 segments.
That's right, yeah.
And then you're going to go and find improvements in each of those. Give us an example of something you found when you were doing that.
Yeah. Until you're shown, and the action coach, my cash flow story was extremely useful, because of course it shows how sensitive and where to go looking, where the most effective place to go looking is. And then you then set yourself a challenge which is higher than you should theoretically be able to achieve. So then you're going to go and turn over every stone, aren't you, to find it. So like on our fruit farm, there's sort of 30 odd fruit pickers outside, and they're picking strawberry and raspberry.
How many tons of fruit do you pick in the summer?
2021 we should do about 150 tons.
Yeah.
So
there's probably not a person listening to this in the UK that hasn't had one of your strawberries or raspberries through Tesco's.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or local supply outlets. Yeah. Hopefully. And then we kind of realised that every single picker picks a tray of fruit and then carries it back to the grading station, so where it's signed in and checked, and then goes for refrigeration. And that took about a minute, or a minute and 20 seconds for every tray of fruit. Now over 18,000 trays of fruit, of course, that's a lot of time. So we realized that we could just simply change the trolleys that they were using for a cost of £3,000 or £4,000, and it would save sort of £10,000 or £11,000 worth of labour straight away, because instead of carrying one tray back, they can put 10 or 15 trays on it, and when they finish their row, they can just take the whole lot to the picking station at once. Yeah. So another example, when we're doing husbandry tasks, just making sure that
just let everyone know what husbandry is, because I didn't know.
Sorry. Yeah, so husbandry is when the crop's growing before it's fruiting. We'll do like leaf removal, or we'll do all sorts of little jobs on the plants to look after them and make sure that they don't get any diseases, or they're managed in the right way. But again, when you've got teams of 15 or 20 people working up and down in rows, any efficiency very, very quickly gets out of control, and you can run up some very big bills. So just having your supervisor there with a stopwatch and setting a budget beforehand and saying, right, the budget for this particular task, dry leaf removal in strawberry or something like that, is 45 minutes per row. Everybody must do 45 minutes per row. Of course, you know how many plants are in the rows, so a quick maths means you need to spend no more than 25 seconds on each plant. And then it just gets monitored as it goes along, and then make sure that our budget that we have set, that we maintain as we go through, and you don't get a shock at the end of the year.
Yeah. And when you're operating on that scale, the difference between doing too much husbandry on a row, when you add that extra labor in against your margins that you get from the supermarkets, you could easily run up a bill so that you're in the negative, can't you? Because the margins aren't great. This is why it's so important to have that microscopic look.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it comes back to staffing and communication with your staff as well, because getting that down to ground level, obviously I'm not the one stood there looking after the people on the ground, so getting that down to ground level as well and communicating that, so knowing what to do, where to look, and then how to communicate it. Yeah,
great. So I always remember hearing a great quote from Tiger Woods, the golfer, and he said, when he's asked why he has a golf coach, he says, well, because I can't see my own swing. And I think it's a really important thing that working with a coach, you do establish blind spots. I know that my coach does that for me as well. What blind spots do you think have come into your field of vision recently?
Well, here I'm holding another book. So this book is What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. And you posted this to me. I don't know if you remember. You posted this to me with a particular page folded over. Because obviously, and this particular one is Habit 8, Negativity, or Let Me Explain Why That Won't Work. And at the time, I think there were negative people that I was employing, and I was not dealing with that in a certain way, and I wasn't noticing that it was dragging me down or pulling me off course. Yeah. So that's one example of a blind spot. And I think we covered it in a few coaching sessions, and maybe you thought there wasn't necessary progress, so you posted me the book so I could sort of quietly read that in my own time as well, which was very effective. So yeah, and you can't see what you can't see, and yeah, part of my journey is sort of learning that I don't know much. So yeah, learning to look around and to listen to other people's sort of views and opinions as well.
Well, I love to say that it's a fool that thinks he's a wise man, and a wise man that knows he's a fool.
Yeah, perfect.
And something that you've been incredibly, you're like a sponge when it comes to books. I think you make sure I'm a chapter ahead of you at every point. And if I get your book that I've not finished, I know I've got to get my hammer down and get it finished, so that you're not talking about stuff I haven't learned yet. And and I think that commitment has shown great amounts of growth in your own development, which is like you said before, you can be different and do different as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's right, and that's what sort of started me on the journey toward coaching. I sort of started reading a few books and realised that I wasn't really scratching on the surface and knowing which way to go. So yeah.
So what do you think has been the impact on you personally in your family life then of the changes that you've made in your business?
I think the biggest changes have been around staff and staffing, sort of management of staff and recruiting the right people. It gets incredibly stressful, and every business owner of whatever, it doesn't matter if you're in farming or accountancy, if you've got the wrong people and they're doing the wrong things, it gets pretty crazy pretty quickly, and it can be very, very stressful. So we keep coming back to the word stress for me, and it was, even just a year ago, I still had a lot of the wrong people on the bus, as it were, and stress levels are really high, working long hours, not seeing a lot of my family. I've got a young family. And over the last sort of 6 months or so, as the coronavirus thing has calmed down, it's been self-evident really that the progress has been made on staffing, and that is sort of, everything feels much more positive. I've got time to spend at home now, which is nice. I'm much more relaxed because I'm confident that I've got the right people in the right roles doing the right things, and it's a case of checking rather than panicking.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that the importance of fun daddy coming home, not grumpy daddy, is not to be underestimated. And if they're anything like my kids, if you're distracted, they'll let you know about that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they will.
She said to me quite recently, said, "Daddy, can you get off that laptop? It's only money. Don't worry about it. Why worry about money when you can come and play?" And then she's absolutely bloody right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, she is right. They do only grow up once. And if you're buried in a whole load of stress and misery, I suppose, is the only way to put it, looking back. Yeah, if the wrong people are on the bus, or even the right people, and they're not being given the right information or the right amount of freedom, or trusted in the way that you should, then it's just walking through treacle. So that for me is certainly getting much easier. I don't think I'm fully there yet. I'm still,
it's a journey, not a destination, isn't it?
Yeah, I still spend evening time, but I spend evening time writing processes and making things better rather than fixing problems.
Yeah, well, that's what we call doing the work once and getting paid for it, and getting the value from it over and over. So that's good quality. That's owner's work you do once and get paid over and over, rather than employees' work is to go around putting out fires.
Yeah, that's right. And I still hold my hands up. It's been a learning journey to get out of doing employees' work and trying to do owners' work together. And I still find myself with spanners in my hands sometimes. So. Well,
you know what? A phrase from your culture document has just popped into my head, and this is excellently written by you. And it said, I think the culture point is excellence. And if I remember rightly, your culture point says, "We aim for perfection, knowing that we'll never actually reach it, but on the way we'll find excellence." I love that.
Yeah, almost word for word. Yeah, I think I used attain it, but yeah.
And that's a brilliant place to come at. So that's what we're aiming for. It's a vector. It's not a destination.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Graham, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are listening to this, who they feel like they've maybe got more to give, there's more impact to have, there's businesses to grow and people to hire, but they feel like they're kind of bogged down in the day-to-day? What advice would you give them?
I think learn to delegate, and learn to delegate effectively will be the first point. And the second probably is that you can't do it on your own. Whether you go to a coaching organization, or whether you pick up some books, or whether you ask somebody who's a trusted advisor or something like that, no one person knows enough or simply doesn't have the perspective. So getting help is definitely the message there. Learning to delegate, because it frees up your time, and then really looking at your processes and putting things in place so that I love the action coach philosophy or the description of a business. it's a commercial, profitable enterprise that runs without you. And if it doesn't, you've just got yourself a job. And sometimes it's a horrible job, especially when things get stressful and all the staff are doing the wrong things. But on the other end of that, when it is running beautifully, and like you say, hopefully, whoever this person was that came into the farm shop and got really great customer experience, that's the best feeling in the world. If people who work for us and are in our business absolutely love it and give their all like that really is the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, great. And if anyone's listening to this, they don't know where Westlands is. It's near a little village. It's Westlands Farm Shop. It's a little village called Wickham, which is just north of Fareham in Hampshire on the south coast. I am coming in soon to do my Christmas order and get my turkey. And I know lots and lots of other people are. So there'll be lots of people in the local community are really excited to see what you do next and see the growth of your business. I am really excited to see where you go next. I know you've got some big plans coming up, and it's a privilege for me to be part of your journey. And I really, really am grateful for you trusting me to work with you on your journey. And I can't wait to see where you go next, because I think it's going to be something great for the local community and for you and the Collett family and for Kaylee and the kids.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And thank you for all your help, because sometimes when it does get tough, it isn't easy to do it on your own. So,
great.
So much appreciated.
Well, thank you for your time today on the podcast. I know the people listening to this are going to get tons and tons of value and inspiration from you sharing your journey. So, Graham, I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. You'd just like to say goodbye to everyone?
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, and we will see you on the next episode of the One Giant Leap podcast with me, Jeff Shrimpton. Thanks for listening.